Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ben Talks About. I'm of course your host, Ben Contreras. So, Halloween is right around the corner, and I decided to celebrate the occasion. I wanted to go back to one of my personal favorite series that I ever did for the channel, where I talk about a bunch of manga. Specifically, throughout October, I'm going to talk about this series that is pretty much the overall definition of not only popularity, but also controversy. I am, of course, talking about the series Death Note. Now, really, what can be said about this franchise that already hasn't been told throughout the rest of the internet? It's one of the, most popular franchises of all time. I first got into the series with around, I want to say, 2 Halloweens ago, where me and my mom and my brother Daniel all decided to watch pretty much the entirety of the series, starting on Halloween, of course, and all three of us pretty much fell in love with the series. So naturally, I got interested in the original manga series, and then soon enough that Christmas, I got the first 6 volumes of the series. Now, I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be able to get through all of them by the end of October, but you never know, things could possibly change. So, let's of course start out with the first volume of the series, Volume 1. Now, for those of you who don't know the story of Death Note and are interested in learning about it for yourself, you probably want to stop the video here because I'm going to be, spoiling the story for quite a lot. So, to start off, the series is about the journey of pretty much 2 characters. One of them being the main protagonist right here, Light Yagami, who is pretty much an everyday school student who is doing, great in school and all that stuff, and is pretty much a genius in all of his classes. Meanwhile, the second character, the demon Ryuk behind Light there, he's pretty much bored with his life in his sort of realm and wants to make his life more interesting. So he decides to drop his notebook called the Death Note into the human world where it is found by Light. And it's here when we get information on what the Death Note is used for. What it is essentially a notebook where its main purpose is to take lives of people whose names are written inside. Now, there are a whole bunch of different rules and regulations about the Death Note, and one thing I liked about each of these volumes is that they have the certain rules for how the notebook is used throughout the chapters, which I thought was a pretty nice touch. Anyway, Light encounters the Death Note and decides to test it out on quite a few people. And by quite a few people, I mean a lot of people. More specifically, criminals and all that kind of stuff. And eventually, the two, Ryuk and Light, meet up with each other, and Ryuk explains that since Light touched the Death Note, it is essentially his until he decides he either doesn't want it anymore, or decides that, or, just dies. And Ryuk overall is pretty much just there for the ride, as he thinks that the humans in this realm are a lot more interesting than the people he sort of knows. Now, immediately one thing that I really like about the first chapter is that it introduces the 2 major characters, and they were probably my favorite part of this entire volume. The dynamic between Light and Ryuk are, of course, extremely contrasting between each other. Light seems like an everyday, regular schoolboy who does, well in his classes and tries to make his family proud, but on the inside, he is a little bit of an insane person, thinking that he has the ability to essentially play God and rid the world of all who he thinks is bad in order to shape the world in his image. He pretty much becomes the main antagonist of the entire series. and that is and I think that's pretty unique. Meanwhile, Ryuk, on the other hand, of course, as you can see from his design, he has pretty much the look of something you'd see in your nightmares. But really, he's probably a lot more relatable than Light. You know, he's pretty much bored with his life and wants to make it way more interesting and thinks that this is the only way to do it. And of course, we can't have Jasper Cat Productions video without Jack wanting to be the star of the show. But yeah, the two of them working together and having, you know, conversations on what they're going to be doing and all that, that's all really cool, and I really liked the dynamic between them. Now, of course, with all these different deaths that have been happening by the likes of Light with the Death Note, this of course attracts the attention of the authorities, and also gains the attention of a very smart and detective who only goes by the name of L, which will then lead to an eventual rivalry between the two geniuses as the two try to figure out who is who. Now, one of the main complaints that I sort of had about this volume concerns the character of L. Not necessarily his personality or what he does, but rather what the volume does that sort of, I feel like, kind of ruins a bit of the suspense of not knowing who he is, because L seems like a very mysterious character, you know. He doesn't really show himself in public, and, you know, he's only really mentioned throughout a lot of the authority figures. But right around this page right here, and I believe there's another page that I bookmarked. Yeah. The pages right here more specifically, we pretty much get a good idea of what L looks like. You know, as you can see, he has very, you know, rather casual looking clothes for someone as intellectual as him. And there's an eventual like plot point in this volume where L seems like he's showing his face off to the public for the first time. And Light, of course, takes this opportunity to kill him as L seems like he was so much of an idiot to, you know, show his face to the world where this person can, you know, get rid of someone's life just by seeing their name or their face. But this eventually turns out to be a scheme to trap Light, as the real L was just toying with him so that he can figure out that, you know, this person who's killing all these people is in the Kanto region of Japan, which is a very cool and quite an it's quite a surprising sort of plot twist, I guess. But with considering the fact that the real L and the fake L look almost nothing alike, as you can see, this is what the fake L looked like right here, you know, it's pretty clear that those two are not the exact same person. One thing that I would have done was any sort of page that has like a sort of image of what the actual L looks like, I would have gotten rid of those completely and have him only mentioned, and the first time we hear him speak is when his partner, Watari, shows all the political characters that laptop that has L's logo. To me, that would be a much better introduction to the character, and also it would have the plot twist of that character not being the real L instead of fake L would have not only been a surprise to the characters in the book itself, but it would have also been more of a surprise to the reader, and it would give L much more of a mystery to them, making his actual reveal, I feel like, more, I guess you could say, impactful. I guess that's kind of like the word I'm looking for. But overall, this volume is a pretty good introduction to the overall series. We immediately understand the concept of what the show, or not the show, the series is trying to get around, the idea of the way the Death Note works, and how the main character is essentially the main villain, and how they also try to give him a bit more of a human side, considering the fact that he, has a family and all that, and just and the overall art style of it, especially considering that this series was first aired in a magazine called Shonen Jump. This sort of gothic and dark art style is quite unique from a place that's more recognizable for things like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto and all that stuff. And overall, if you're interested in getting into the series, I definitely recommend you get the first volume. It starts out very interestingly, and it ends on a pretty good and exciting cliffhanger. So, overall, I hope you all enjoyed me talking about a little bit about the first volume of the Death Note manga series. I had a lot of fun talking to all of you about it, and stay tuned next time where we move on to volume 2 and get a lot more screen time with the Japanese police and L. Until then, I'm Benjamin Contreras, and bye.